These unusual markings on a remote Northland hillside have got quite a story to tell. Go back over 170 years and you would have seen one of the most incredible structures built anywhere, anytime in New Zealand's 1,000-year history. Kia ora, I'm Mihingarangi Forbes. Join us for the stories of Ruapekapeka. In December 1845, just 5 years after the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, the relationship between Māori and the British government had turned sour, with war breaking out. More than 1,000 British Army and Navy troops struggled through dense bush and challenging conditions to attack a pa in the middle of nowhere. The world's biggest superpower are about to take aim at one of the most sophisticated military installations they've ever tackled, anywhere in the world. Strategically built inland by hand, 30 kilometres south of Waitangi. This is Ruapekapeka, a bat's nest, a construction that was more than 6 months in the making. A fortress that would shelter its people from the enemy. Ngāpuhi chiefs Turuki Kawiti and Honi Heke have been fighting the British forces in a series of battles, allowing Kawiti's strategic masterpiece at Ruapekapeka to be built as a trap for the British. Colonel Despard, who was commanding the British forces, bombarded the pa for 10 days, while the inhabitants stayed safe in purpose-built bomb shelters. One of the guardians of the stories of Ruapekapeka is Penny Henare from Ngāti Hine, whose whakapapa links him to both Māori and British sides of the conflict. It is a pretty tough question, but what do you think the legacy of Ruapekapeka is?
It's one of pain, sorrow, determination. Pain because of what our tupuna endured here, sorrow because of that enduring loss post the Battle of Ruapekapeka. But it's inspirational, it's a legacy, it's something that shines as a beacon of hope for our people despite its tragic past. Continues to remind us of our determination and what I think we can aspire to, which is what Kawiti said, which was titiro ki ngā taumata o te moana in his lament after the battle.
To understand what happened at Ruapekapeka, we need to understand the events that happened in the north after the signing of the treaty. So I've come to meet historian Dr. Vincent O'Malley, who specialises in the New Zealand wars.
An overarching theme of all of the New Zealand wars is these two competing ideas of what the treaty was about. On the one hand, you have the Crown's idea, which is based on Article 1 of the English translation of the treaty, that the Crown has full sovereignty over New Zealand after 1840, and that's its expectation. On the other hand, Article 2 of Te Tiriti, where Māori are guaranteed to tēnā rangatiratanga over their own affairs. And so there's a kind of a clash of these visions. On the one hand, Māori expectations of partnership. On the other hand, Crown assumptions of unbridled sovereignty.
Tensions began to really ramp up here in the Bay of Islands immediately after the signing. And that's because the new government changed the rules. Māori were no longer able to charge anchorage fees. They couldn't even mill their own kauri. And for Māori, it was the beginning of an economic decline that's still being felt to this very day. The breakdown of trust between Māori and Pākehā settlers resulted in the famous story where young Ngāpuhi chief Hone Heke protested against British rule by chopping down the flagpole at Ruapekapeka 4 times. On the 4th time, his fellow chief Kawiti created a diversion in the town by attacking soldiers from the local garrison. So Vincent, what happened here? So 1845, it must have been pretty full-on bullet holes in this church here.
Yeah, so here we see some bullet holes from engagement that took place here. While Hone Heke was attacking the Flagstaff at the northern end of town, Kawiti was sent to create a diversion, hoping to draw the troops out from the Flagstaff, because after the 3rd attack on the Flagstaff in January 1845, they built a garrison and a blockhouse around it, encased the Flagstaff in steel, and put a £100 reward out for Hone Heke. And so Kawiti comes down to this end of town, and they come across a party of 40 British troops, and some fierce firefighting takes place, and you can see some of the results of this here. So there were 20 British killed and another 23 injured. The figures for Māori are a bit less reliable, but I think the best estimate is 13 killed and 28 wounded. So, fairly significant casualties all round for an engagement whose main objective was simply to fell the Flagstaff.
Oh wow, so Lovell is one of the 6 who've passed away defending Ruapekapeka. I'm a Lovell Smith, and my grandmother is Lovell Smith. As the fighting broke out in the small town, understandably, locals were terrified and they began to be evacuated by boats out in the bay. This was the tinderbox that ignited the Northern Wars. And soon after this, Kawiti would show the British his remarkable strategic military brilliance at the Battle of Waihaewai.
He was a short man, wiry. He's a veteran who'd served in well over a dozen campaigns right across the country. We know that he commanded a presence wherever he went. The missionaries described him as somebody who was no muck around kind of a person. In fact, when asked at the time of the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi whether or not he should go and consult with his people, he simply turned around and said, "I'm the rangatira, I tell them what to do."
Lieutenant Colonel Despard, what kind of leader was he? Can you describe him?
Well, Despard, when he arrives in New Zealand, is about 60 years old, and he hasn't seen active service for about 30 years. And he's a very obstinate person, and he's also very contemptuous of Māori. And shortly before his first action at Waihaewai, Tamati Wakaneni comes to see him and to offer his services and those of his people. And Despard replies, "If I want assistance from savages, I'll let them know." And the translator is so concerned by this that he refuses to tell Neni this because he knows that he'll probably just storm off greatly offended by this. And later on at Waihaewai, when Despard makes it clear that he's going to storm the pā, Tamati Wakaneni says, "He tangata kuware tēnei tangata," and Despard again asks his translator, what did the native say? And the translator at first refuses to tell him, and he's ordered to eventually, and he says, "You're a very stupid person, sir."
150 of Despard's best men ran up this hill, and when they got 20 metres from the pa, they were met with devastating fire by Kawati's men, and within minutes the place was littered with redcoats, 40 dead, 70 wounded. It was a massacre. Colonel Despard relied heavily on a sense of military superiority. His tactics involved confidently walking towards Ohaiawaipa.
Tatamaina ngā hoia pāke tatamaina ha. E reira tunu, ha tatamaina ki me le toronga ngā kariri ngā pū. Tatatuana, ka tuko ko ngā mata. Hinga katoa no hoki ngā pāke I reira.
Kawati had designed a system of earthworks that was nearly impregnable to the Brits. Ohaiawai was a prototype version of Ruapekapeka, which was to be the ultimate expression of defiance. Today, a church stands on the site of Ohaiawaipa. A memorial honouring soldiers marks the mass grave where their dead now rest, including Lieutenant George Toby Philpotts.
Tētahi tai ki roto ko te Philpotts nei ne. E ai ki te kōrero I pato ia ke mate, ka tei ka poro atu na kiri anganga. Unua maitana, I poro unua maitana kiri anganga me te rere o te mene a. I reira ka manawa ki ora hoki wana hoa pākea, ko hoki oma rātu. Nā I reira ka kite atu tērā āhuatanga ngā pākea o hoki oma ana, ko puta mai rātu ki waho I te pā, ka kawe te wahaka.
Given that Kawati's men were so heavily outnumbered, not bad for a bunch of people that Despard described as savages. But if they thought it was tough here, it was only going to get tougher because 30 kilometres down the road lay Ruapekapeka. What about the name Ruapekapeka? Where'd that come from?
Well, Ruapekapeka is the bat's nest, and we call it Ruapekapeka simply because of the kinds of underground network that they had here, where people were underground in darkness, just like a bat is. And we know bats aren't on their own, they're usually in groups, so Ruapekapeka, the bat's nest. I think it stands as a temple, if you like, of what warfare really was for our people back then, and how brilliant Kawiti was as a tactician.
While Kawati kept building his fortress at Ruapekapeka, the British forces under Colonel Despard waited for reinforcements from Sydney. Eventually, the British were ready for another fight. They travelled by boat as far as they could, then began the challenging trek inland through dense bush. It was December, and life for the troops was miserable.
This is still the pre-reform British Army, and it's pretty appalling. The pay is terrible, the food and the housing conditions are terrible, alcoholism is rife, and the officers still buy their commission, so they're not appointed on the basis of merit. People who witness floggings of British troops, some are left in tears, are just distraught at what they've witnessed. So the British Army is really quite a barbaric institution at this time.
Te Wārihi Hetaraka is a master carver whose whānau comes from Whangaruru and is from a long line of tōhunga. His ancestors were also at Ruapekapeka. What would have been the preparation wairua for the warriors going into battle?
My auntie had a real gentle way of relaying the story to me of how her great-grandfather prepared his warriors for battle. And she said, and it was exactly as you say, it was our wairua. It wasn't preparing the tinana, they were already young and strong. But the whole 3-day wānanga was preparing them mentally for the task ahead of them. And which means that the wānanga would have covered several topics of importance in regards to the coming battle, reasons why and all of that sort of thing. But the physical wasn't the focus. It was ko kia haka kahangio hoki te wairua roto hoki te tinana. Mā tēnā ka haere tika hoki te tinana roto hoki te mea, te pakanga.
Why do you think this location, was this specific, was it chosen?
He most definitely chose it, and let me show you why.
Okay. Kia tūpato o waiwai Whotiporo.
So from most vantage points, even low into the trenches like this place, so from here and other places in the pā, you can still see a clear line of sight to Hokianga and also to Rākau Manga to the east. And the purpose of that was to unify the people of the north against a force like this.
So you can call on people if you needed.
There's an old saying, ka mimiti te puna ki tau mārere, ka tōtō ki Hokianga, ka mimiti ki Hokianga, ka tōtō ki tau mārere.
Gosh, I hadn't realised how close quarter the combat actually had been. If you cast your eye half a K over there and see the green, that's where the military set up the artillery and the rockets, and just past that, on the brown hill, was where their camp was. And for a whole week, they bombarded this place. The British plan was simple: bomb the enemy into submission. This went on for 10 days without the loss of a single Maori life. How was this possible? So this is a hut, right? Or a trench?
This would have been probably more a hut. It would have possibly have had a house over it. We know that the outer palisades were a combination of bush and probably something just as deep.
Likely to have been deeper, and it's fallen in a wee bit, and so you would have been sleeping down here and hiding out.
Yeah, that's right. And we know this is probably more likely to be a hut given its connectivity to the others, whereas the outer palisade was simply that, straight palisade.
The Ruapekapeka palisades were designed to stop cannonballs and provide shelter for sharpshooters who could pick off advancing British troops. The double wall design with flex reinforcing provided extra resilience. From the trenches below, warriors could safely hide from enemy gunfire and change positions around the perimeter of the pā, while covering any lines of approach.
It would have been sort of your traditional palisade pā, but probably on steroids, for we know that things like this would never withstand the kind of artillery that was here at Ruapekapeka.
What kind of size?
So we're talking tree size. We're
Trunks.
talking 3 or 4 people in
Whole
diameter as a whole palisade.
Underneath the shelters, Kawati had bunkers dug out so those inside the pa could wait out the bombardment in relative safety. People could move from bunker to bunker and exit parts of the pa through an intricate tunnel system.
Absolutely terrifying to have 30 tons of artillery rain down upon you for 10 days.
What must the whanaungatanga been like amongst the people?
From one particular account from an Irishman who was on the other side of the pa, they could hear haka and waiata raining out during the night and in the morning.
To keep them going, to keep them focused.
Motivation, lament, perhaps scared, moke moke.
So I'm really interested in the role of wahine in war. Were there women here at Ruapekapeka?
Yeah, we understand that there were wahine here, probably not to the extent that we had seen during the battles of 1822 onward. But here at Ruapekapeka, we know that it wasn't just soldiers who built this pa, it was an entire village and wahine. And when I say wahine, I use it in a very broad sense because we know that kuia were involved because of their ability to be matakite and heal and karakia, while also having young wahine, young kōtiro really, who were there involved actively in the front line.
Their role was to finish off some of the wounded?
Finish off the wounded, but perhaps one spin on it is it's the ultimate insult to be killed by a wahine.
One of the famous wahine tō to emerge from the Battle of Ruapekapeka is Te Hikitene. In this photo from the early 1900s, she's almost 70 years old. But at Ruapekapeka, as a young girl, she was already on her way to becoming a legendary warrior.
We estimate she would have been approximately 10 or 12 at the time of the Battle of Ruapekapeka, and she recalls to her uri as she got older playing a role here, and that role was to rush out before mortars exploded and try and defuse it by simply pulling the wick out.
It's like something out of a movie, you know, running out there before the wick gets to the bomb and pulling it out.
You could imagine there would have been a pretty high casualty rate if they didn't get it right.
Ammunition of any sort was scarce for Māori. The recovered gunpowder was put to good use for the musket. Tell me about this 12-year-old whanaunga of yours. What was his name?
Pene Amene Zimu.
And which war was he involved in?
Ruapekapeka.
And what was his role?
Ruapekapeka, loading the guns. He was 10 years old.
Was it him alone?
There's a few. We know that he was there because we were connected to him. Their role was to receive the empty muskets from the warriors, load them, and then pass them back up. That's a huge job for a 10-year-old, come to think of it. Those ramrods, they're quite long. They have to pump that down. They've got to make sure they have the right shot in there so they don't blow themselves up. Yeah, and then the wadding on top of that, and then the ball, and gosh, they could shoot themselves trying to pass it up even. But, you know, that's the mahi that those kids did.
The bombardment was constant. You can only imagine what it was like for the people here with the impact and the noise. And then finally the British stormed Ruapekapeka. And it said the only man left here was Kawati himself. The rest had fled through the tunnels and the trenches, and they were at the back of the park. One of the stories says that the people were at prayer, not expecting the British to attack on a Sunday. When the attack started, the warriors went back into the pa to defend Kawati, and the women and children escaped into the bush. And so when they finally entered the pa, what would they have found?
It would have been rather confusing given it would have looked deserted. There were a few warriors simply to hold off the onslaught or hold off the oncoming raid to allow others to escape. There were also dead.
Yes.
They found some who had died throughout the battle, but for the most part, it was pretty much deserted.
They found a prayer book too.
They did find a prayer book, and that prayer book now is a taonga to us. It's come back to us though, because when they found it, they claimed it for themselves too.
Finding this prayer book, does it say to you that the people in the pa were Christian?
Most definitely. We know that many of our tupuna around that time started actually changing their names and were becoming more and more influenced by the Christian ways, and so it's no surprise that they found that and that we were considered religious people.
Once cleared, British engineers made sketches of Kawati's military masterpiece. Finally, getting an up-close look at the fortress they were unable to crack. Soon after, they burnt it to the ground.
In the immediate aftermath of Ruapekapeka, Gray proclaims it as a brilliant success, and so he speaks up victory, but almost acts as if he's been defeated. By contrast, Hone Heke and Kawati remain at large. If anything, their mana and their standing has only increased as a result of what's happened. There are no land confiscations. The British haven't really extended their authority over Māori in the district. And I think the crucial thing and the telling thing is that the flagstaff on Maiki Hill remains down. And it's only re-erected again in 1858, not by the Crown, but by Ngāpuhi themselves. And the person who's instrumental in that is Kawati's son, Mahi Paraone Kawati. And so they raise the flagstaff not as a symbol of their subjection to British authority or British sovereignty, but as a token of reconciliation and as an invitation for the Crown to re-engage with them in a mutually beneficial partnership and relationship. Because the damage and the destruction that's done to the local economy is something that Ngāpuhi never really recover from.
In 2017, what are the effects of that campaign against your people?
Poverty hit our region, poverty that hadn't been experienced given the boom times in the Bay of Islands. So it's had very much a negative impact on our people after the Battle of Ruapekapeka, but this place still stands as a beacon of our success, despite some historians saying we lost the war or we won the war. This place is here today as a memory and as a beacon of what our tupuna believed in and what we stood up against.
You know, what I've seen and heard while making this documentary is that history here in the north is very much alive. 170 years after the wars, the north has never really recovered. Not for Māori anyway. The grief, the mamae, the loss and the poverty is just skin deep. It's so close to the surface. And I could feel it when I met Māori historian Arapita Hamilton. What do you think has been the legacy of the Northern Wars on the northern people?
Our tupuna se, ka tū he Māori ki tō kuaha, tū tahangana, ka hoa tū ki aia he paraikete he kai rānei. If a naked Māori is standing at your door, will you give him a blanket and food? And then he concludes, e ngāwari te ki ko ahau tua hoa. It's easy for you to say I'm your friend. And sure enough, this generation e tūtahangana mātou ki te kuaha o te kāwanatanga. We are dispossessed of our lands, our resources, and we stand naked before the government with very little land and with very little resources.
Kei te rongo au ki te mama e kei roto tonu i a koe tō iwi tō hapu.
Oh, ai, ko te pōharatanga o te iwi e aue ana rā. Me pēhea rā o tātou tamariki ka ora i roto i tēnei ao. Yeah. Ka pupuhi te hau te pauro o te pū. Ka pākarukaru ngā kōhua reno. Ka tāpewhi ngā parai ki te whero. Engari ka toi tū te whenua.